Bradley Zordreger here, back in the banger hangar for what will be my first Overkill review of 2020. If you haven't yet, please don't forget to subscribe, hit our Patreon and join us there if you can. We appreciate any and all support. This week, I'm reviewing the new album from Deathcore's Poster Boys / Whipping Boys. The new album from Suicide Silence called Become the Hunter, out today on Nuclear Blast Records. Suicide Silence formed in 2002 in California and went through a few lineup changes before more or less settling in for their 2007 debut LP, The Cleansing. That album produced the lyrics / back of t-shirt slogan in massive letters, "Pull the trigger, bitch," and that brashness kind of, like I said, made them the poster / whipping boys for the budding deathcore genre. Actually, that was especially the case for charismatic frontman Mitch Lucker and his chicken peck headbang / stomp thing that he would do on stage. He had his own trademark stage moves, which is pretty cool. A bassist swap happened just in time for their 2009 Circle Pit-inducing album No Time to Bleed, before the band came back in 2011 with The Black Crown, which is one of the first albums to really proudly introduce nu metal into deathcore, as in hey, this is what we like, and we're going to put it into this sound. Unfortunately, tragedy struck a year later when vocalist Mitch Lucker passed following a motorcycle accident. The band regrouped, added All Shall Perish vocalist Eddie Hermida, and came back in 2014 with a solid but forgettable album. A few years later, they split their fan base in half, or even further, with a Rough Around the Edges album that focused more on nu metal than deathcore. In fact, it didn't really focus on deathcore at all. At all. They were kind of just by deathcore. I actually saw these guys when they were touring that first album, The Cleansing, and I entered as a hater and left a fan. I even bought a shirt, which I still have. That being said, they really did lose a good portion of their fan base on the last one, including myself. Did you see my review? So let's see if they can, win me and their fan base back a second time. So first off the bat, this is definitely a deathcore album. There are two main sections for these positives, and it starts with the creep and ends with the crunch. I'm going to start with the former. At first listen, this might seem like a complete abandonment of their last album. And what might really surprise those of you who saw my last album review is that I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, that they didn't completely abandon it. I think it's a good thing. One of this album's biggest strengths is that it maintains that eerie, haunting energy from the last album, but it channels it through deathcore. It's like a poltergeist, but it's more like the menacing kind than, the kind of goofy playing pranks on you one, more like, the movie Poltergeist than, I don't know, Peeves from Harry Potter. Honestly, when I first heard the album, the song Skin Tight, which borrows most from the last album, I was like, uh-oh, here we go. But that actually ended up being one of my favorite songs on the album. And I'm not just saying that because there's no singing on it. That was very divisive on the last album. I actually think that adding some singing here could have been very cool and taken it to the next level. Often that creepy vibe works its way into specific elements, such as on the song The Scythe, which has this solo that is very sparse, almost bluesy. Although I'm not huge on the hammer-on pull-off kind of riff that they open the song with, and indeed they kind of overuse that kind of style of riff throughout the album, I was a huge fan of when they bring it back as just this weird, creepy echo right at the end of the song after there was this trempic blast beat section. That contrast really worked for me. They go way further back than just their last album on the song Love Me to Death, which the opening brings to mind the opening of Unanswered from their The Cleansing album. It's just frantic. And sometimes a throwback is exactly what you need. They really settle into their sound on the song Disaster Valley, which keeps it fast and heavy throughout the entire thing. It even starts with these weird squeaky screeches that are really got me excited for the song, and then it's just unrelenting throughout. It's like death metal by way of Slipknot with these circle pit inducing drums throughout. The title track, Become the Hunter, has a riff that reminds me of deathcore pioneers Despised Icon. Hell, partway through the song, the vocalists kind of remind me of that band with a split between lower brutal vocals and a hardcore style yell. So yeah, if you're gonna approximate a deathcore band, you might as well approximate one of the best. That's not to say these guys can't or don't try new things on this album. The down-tuned, almost like sludgy riff on In Hiding feels like a change of pace for these guys. But they quickly change it up with like this catchy metalcore lead right into a blast beat, which then goes into like this threateningly tight chugging section. I'm being an optimist today, and I'm going to start the worst parts of this album out with a positive negative, which is that I wish that the intro was stretched out into an entire song. This one and a song proper, I was really intrigued by this song, and I just wish it was a full song, because that's really cool. Unfortunately, one of the main problems for this album is that too often they ditch the riff in favor of the bounce. Like maybe they're going from like a Slipknot to more a Mudvayne or something like that. Not to talk shit on Mudvayne, but you know, I prefer more riffs in my deathcore. Too much of this really lends credence to what a lot of true metalheads have to say about deathcore, which is that it's like all chugs, no substance, there's no riffs, it's just heavy for the sake of being heavy. I spoke earlier about how much I love the atmosphere, but unfortunately sometimes that's not quite enough to save these songs. Despite like this mystical opening, Serene Obscene falls victim to the bounce. And Death's Anxiety goes from this like promising blast beat section. Unfortunately here the drums kind of bury this staccato suffocation style riff, and you know, they just go from the blast beats to, what do you guess? A bouncy riff. Big fucking surprise. That seems to be a problem on a lot of this album. For every inspired part, it seems to be a part that's just going through the motions. Unfortunately, sometimes there just isn't even really an inspired part. Feel Alive doesn't really do much more than chug chug band, chug chug band. It's just all too predictable. And while the solos are used smartly and shine throughout the entire album, perhaps as a reprieve from this, the leads rarely hold their weight. The tappy guitar riff in Love Me to Death, again, they kind of overuse this like hammer-on pull-off tappy kind of thing throughout. It just doesn't do anything. It just, perhaps it's the tone or the lack of punch in the playing, but it just kind of feels like it's laid on top for no reason other than to add something. And it really just takes me out of the songs. Unfortunately, so do the lyrics. You know, there's a line that says, "I need to kill to feel alive," which would maybe work if this was like a concept album about a serial killer, but just here doesn't really feel believable. And then there's the line "Love Me to Death," which is just like repeated and beaten into your head over and over again. It feels like a dramatic high school breakup, not something I'd expect from 30-something-year-old men. With their last two albums, Suicide Silence overcommitted to what they wanted to do and then overcorrected. They ditched the deathcore way too hard on their last one, but then on this one, I think that they went way too far back, which almost makes it feel like they're feeling guilty. Like I said, Hermida's croon here could have stood strong against this like backdrop of growls and screeches rather than the weird like faux tortured soul thing he did throughout their last album. And honestly, if he was singing a little bit more, it might have added some purpose to more of this new metal bounce that they had going on. Music and art should not and cannot be consumed in a vacuum, as much as I think Suicide Silence wish it could here. Unfortunately, one can not simply review this album without taking into account what they were saying on their last album cycle. In an interview, Eddie said, "Fact is, the reason people don't believe in deathcore is it sounds dumbed down and cheesy and not challenging to play." They spent a lot of their last album cycle basically deriding this genre, and then for them to just suddenly go back to it makes it feel like this isn't the music they want to play. They don't believe in this, and if you don't really believe in your own music, why should I? Honestly, like this album seems like the kind that if you played it for them on their last album cycle, they would say that this is complete garbage. But honestly, there's a compromise, I think, somewhere between the last album and this album, and maybe that could be this band's sound moving forward. So while I still think that they're trying to figure it out, and the score I give this might be slightly higher if not for their entire bashing of the genre for the entire last press cycle, I've got to knock the score down a little bit for that. I think I'm going to give it 2 out of 5 skulls. Fortunately for fans of deathcore, the genre is in a great place right now. I mean, check out my hoodie, Brand of Sacrifice. Beyond that, we've got the band Lorna Shore and their album Immortal, which came out a few weeks ago on Century Media. I wish I could give it a full review, but unfortunately I can't. The third song, This Is Hell, was playing when I was sitting in the Exclaim office, and this one part at I think it's like 3:56 came on, and it was just so heavy that I just started laughing out loud, which really says all that there is about this album. It is absolutely crushing, but then there's a lot of like really like good leads and like some like symphonic black metal elements. The fourth song, Hollow Sentence, starts out with like this like piano orchestration stuff that sounds like, and I shit you not, Blue by Eiffel 65. And it is fucking sick. Anyway, that's my shout out for the week. Go check that out. Go check out the albums. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying.